Well, welcome to the Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You podcast. My name is Sean Langwell, and I am your host. And if you like honest, vulnerable, and real stories about what it takes to not only become great, but self-confident and bold enough to be yourself, then this show is for you. Each of my guests started out as ordinary people like you and me and have accomplished extraordinary things in their lives to be considered great masters or experts at what they have been called to do. Join me each episode for inspiring, encouraging, and meaningful conversations with diverse people from all walks of life and industry. Leaders and brave individuals who offer unique insights into the fields of arts, entertainment, business, finance, technology, healthcare, sports, psychology, recovery, self improvement, personal growth, and so much more. Whether you are in the same field as my guest or not, I guarantee you will walk away from each episode feeling better about yourself and inspired to take the next bold step toward your own goals and aspirations. Your life will improve if you dare to be great and dare to be you. And I have invited back Natalie Gould, who is just a wonderful speaker, presenter, and human being overall. And we're going to dive into a little conversation here about storytelling and how that relates to not only authors, because obviously that's the most logical fit, but also business owners. I've been in marketing and advertising for over 34 years, and Natalie's got a background that we're going to get into here in a second as a farmer and also as a speaker, teacher, coach, similar to the stuff that I'm doing. And we're going to show how we might be able to look at that from a point of integration and teaching and outward facing. So it's kind of like taking the inside out. And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit here. Before we do, Natalie is a coach, storyteller, and retreat leader who guides people and organizations through transformation using embodied practices rooted in nature, narrative, and nervous system regulation. After a post-viral condition left her disabled, Natalie recovered using somatic and mind-body approaches. This journey transformed her work. She now helps people make change in their lives, particularly learning to live more sustainably with greater purpose. Her approach integrates her background in theater and outdoor education with extensive training in spiritual formation and leadership development. She spent over a decade in corporate leadership, including as CFO of a small multinational software company, before dedicating herself fully to coaching and retreat work. Natalie is writing a memoir about her farm and healing journey and publishes a free newsletter on Substack where she weaves farm stories with practical teachings on nervous system regulation and living with greater presence and wholeness. Welcome back, Natalie.
It's so great to be back, Sean. I have a little cold, so I sound a little stuffy, but I'm really glad to be here because last time we talked about nervous system regulation, one of my favorite topics, and now we get to talk about storytelling, the number two or a twin to that.
Yeah, and ironically, we get to talk about, the nervous system regulation, and now we get to also talk a little bit about health and how to navigate, despite what life deals our way and showing
Hmm.
up no matter what. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I appreciate is having guests on the show like you who have similar but different backgrounds. And when I created this show, I really, really wanted it to be the breadth and depth. It just so happens because of my circle that I tend to gravitate towards authors because we have such a vibrant writing community with Redwood writers, which is where you and I met initially. And and we're going to use that as a springboard because
Hmm.
writing is something that a lot of people want to do. Not everybody does. In
Hmm.
particular, writing a book. I read research that, 90 to 95% of the people have aspirations of wanting to write a book. The percentage that actually follow through and do it, like most big goals, is much smaller than that, less than 5%. Um, so let's use that as a springboard. You're in the pro. How far along are you on your memoir? Let's just start there and we'll work back.
I think my manuscript is in its sort of fifth editing stage. So my hope is that I'm going to self-publish later this year. That's my plan, and I'm excited about it. I've had a lot of beta readers and had a lot of good feedback from their experience reading it. So I'm excited to share. But it is a big project to write a book. So
It is. And do you have a working title? Have you finalized the title?
I have a working title, but I'm not quite sure. Right now it's called Sparrow and Crow Farm: Stories of Faith, Land, and a Nervous System.
Okay.
And I may change that, but we'll see. It is 11 years of life on my farm. So what you would hopefully look for in farm stories, with me wrangling cows and raising chickens and that sort of thing, and talking about the history in the land. But on the backdrop of that is an inner journey as well. And it goes through my illness and recovery as well.
Right. And we talked at length about that the last time, folks. If you want to look up, it was probably about a month or two ago. We're recording this now in February of 2026, but all the episodes are just look up Sean Langwell or Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You, and you can find Natalie's episode. Um, but let's look at this. So this is an 11-year journey.
Hmm.
I just celebrated um, publishing my 10-year anniversary edition of Beyond Recovery, and I know what that feels like. So we have that in common. Now, the inner journey outward for me was very specific, talking about a very clear um, problem and ailment in my journey through addiction and recovery.
Hmm.
Um, Based on what we talked about last time, is any of the challenges that you had or any of those challenges finding their way into this story as part of the backstory, or is it more skewed towards the farming and how you live with the land?
Yeah, it's all intertwined, I would say. The recovery, the illness that we talked about last time is the last 3 years of the book, 3.5 years or so. But I see how the seeds of that illness were planted. So as the stories go along in the book, you kind of see signs of dysregulation, I guess. And there's definitely going to be difficult chapters for some people to read because we go through the firestorms here in Sonoma County. And that is also a setup I see now into my nervous system dysregulation. So that's on the backdrop. But I want to make sure people know it's also full of delightful, silly things too. I wanted it to be a collection of stories. I modeled it, or I thought of James Herriot's books a lot, if you're familiar with All Creatures Great and Small,
I've
where
heard the title, but I'm not familiar with the book.
yeah, he wrote a series of books. They've been made into a couple different television series. He was a vet in veterinary doctor in the UK, and he wrote these individual chapters about episodes of his life working in the countryside in England. And some of the stories are just funny and silly, and some of them are sad and difficult. And that's kind of what I wanted to present, which is life has all of those different kinds of stories. And so I have some that are really silly, some that make you think, I hope, some that I feel are magical. Now, it is a memoir, so everything I wrote happened, but it felt magical to me at the time that I experienced it too. And there's going to be things that are uncomfortable and make people cry too. I have heard that feedback, but that's the intent of the book, is to show the whole that's all of life, is all those things. But in the end, overall, it's hopeful, and I want people to take away a sense of possibility for themselves when they read it.
So I don't want to put you on the spot because this
Yeah.
is going to tie into some of the direction that I want to take with storytelling, having been you've got the corporate side and
Hmm.
software side. I've got it on an advertising and a marketing side. So we're going to put these together for the listeners. We're not
Hmm.
going off rails here. But in terms of the fundamentals of marketing,
Hmm.
i.e., stuff that's been pounded into my head, perhaps you as well, there's three basic fundamentals. There's who do you want to reach? What do you want to say to them? What do you want them to think, act, feel, or do?
Hmm.
I use that as a frame for really my day job, but also in corporate and consulting with small and medium business owners, and in particular authors. There's a lot of authors, including myself, that aren't 100% clear about who that ideal audience is. In other
Hmm.
words, who are we writing this book for? And I don't want to put you on the spot
Mhm.
because I know you like to have some preparation, but I am going
It's
to do
okay.
a little bit here. In terms of when you're writing this book, did you have a particular person or group of people that you wanted to reach with by sharing your story? And if so, who?
Yeah, that's a question they ask for you to figure out for your book pitch, and I would say maybe someone similar to myself that is maybe they struggled with a chronic illness or they just felt stuck in some way.
Hmm.
Um, it might be a book more for women, but I hope that men read it as well. But trying to really come to a place of self-acceptance, I think that's a common theme.
I
And
like
so,
that.
so for people who, one, if you enjoy farm, I think that's a starting place. You're going to want to enjoy nature and farm stories to start with,
Okay.
but also something that's going to intertwine that journey of self-acceptance. So someone who's on that kind of healing journey, I think they would get a lot out of the book.
And just without having read any of it, even
Hmm.
as a beta reader, the immediate thing, I mean, there's tons of metaphors
Hmm.
from a religious perspective on down through spiritual and otherwise. And I know
Hmm.
you've got a spiritual background here.
Hmm.
Tying into the farm analogy, if you will,
Hmm.
and acceptance, how, just curious, because we're going to springboard this into storytelling,
Hmm.
taking a theme, for example, of acceptance.
Hmm.
I've grown food organically in my youth. We did a little bit this last year, but there's a level of acceptance that you have to have as a farmer.
Hmm.
There's a
Hmm.
level of acceptance we need to have as human beings, but as a farmer in particular, and I'm just going to share a little anecdote, and maybe
Yeah.
you can use it as a dovetail to talk a little bit further about your story. Um, we really wanted to plant sunflowers.
Yeah.
And the old adage of the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, we were a little miffed because our neighbor had these sunflowers that were like 15 feet tall, and we're staring at them and we get the benefit of looking at them, but we wanted to grow our own.
Yeah.
So we planted seeds. We dug trenches. We did what we thought was
Hmm.
right, and it wasn't working. They weren't growing. We're like, the crows are getting them. So we decided to put nets on. And our level of acceptance, the point of this is it wasn't there. It was non-existent. Then we started wondering if the slugs were getting them as they're coming up for shoots. So all these things that were out of our
Hmm.
control, we
Hmm.
were trying to grow sunflowers just for the beauty of looking at sunflowers. And as it turns out, there were a few that finally made it, and we decided to plant them somewhere else. And then here's the kicker. We asked our neighbor why his were growing so well. And he said he was fertilizing them every single week, 2 to 3 times more than what was required. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, what did you do to prepare the soil? Um, Nothing. I grabbed a handful of seeds and I scattered them in the yard and then I fertilized the crap out of them. No pun intended.
Hmm.
Um, so that level of acceptance, human beings dealing with stuff that's unexpected, huge, you know, crises that you had to deal with recently as you're finishing this book up. Walk us through what that looks like as you have portrayed it so far in the book.
Yeah, I try to plant my own seeds to show that I wanted to control. I wanted to create this place that was my little Eden. I could welcome people here to a place of safety and beauty. And nature just shows you do have to do the work. You have to, learn about the land, learn about the soil, learn about the conditions, and try to work with it. And then there's also a level that you can't control. And the Tubbs fire certainly was that really breaking point for me where I, really broke a sense of safety for me. And
Hmm.
coming to a place of acceptance was really hard of just that we can't control a certain level of things. And so I'm using a lot of natural metaphors, nature-based metaphors and stories to kind of demonstrate that we're working within this system of life, and we have to take action, but also be in the flow of things. I'm not sure if I'm being
No, you
completely
are, and
clear.
and
Yeah.
and that's you bring in further insights as far as the dynamics, and I threw some buzzwords out there, and you just picked up and ran with them. The control aspect is
Yeah,
something that a lot of people
yeah.
deal with. And when things happen to us that aren't part of what we were expecting, it's kind of hard to learn to get to a place. We're not talking five stages of grief here per se.
Mhm.
Happens to be one of those. But there's this natural resistance that we have as human beings to change. And especially when things that are impacting our physical or mental well-being, for good, being good, bad, or indifferent, we get stuck. You mentioned stuck earlier in this
Yeah.
place, what I call complacency. And quite honestly, complacency kills any kind of motivation and it also kills any type of momentum that we get.
Hmm.
And there's been tons of books written about, get out of your comfort zone. Oh, you listen to them till
Hmm.
you're blue in your face. But when you're there and you've lived through some of this, did you lose your house in the fire, by the way, or no?
I didn't, and that for people listening, that was hard because I almost felt, and that comes through in the chapter I wrote about it, that I that my level of fear or disruption or all whatever that was almost was not acceptable, if that makes sense, because I didn't
Hmm.
lose my house. It came within a half a mile, and the Tubbs fire, and that fire moved so fast that half a mile was nothing. And so, but I don't think I acknowledged my own sense of grief and fear and all of those things because I didn't
Yeah.
lose my house. And so if people hearing this message, that's an important one, a takeaway one from the book is that when we experience these major life disruptions, sometimes we might negate our own experience because we weren't impacted, quote, as badly as someone else. But it's still important to attend to what's gone on for us, that our sense of safety still was broken at anyone in Sonoma County, I think.
It was. It was traumatic as a community. It wasn't down south. That happened subsequent. It was in
Hmm.
our own backyard, and there's
Hmm.
people that we knew and loved. And
Hmm.
those stories, that's the impact of story of telling this from lived experience, either as a survivor of an actual crisis or like you're alluding to, almost as a survivor that has the same not the same, has different emotional
Hmm.
responses to this, and one of which could be, and I mean, this may be a stretch, but it could be survivor's remorse or survivor's
Hmm.
guilt that,
Hmm.
oh, I didn't have it as bad as them. But all of that aside, these are things that we can basically internalize,
Hmm.
process. And once we go through that process, they become magnificent opportunities to tell a story,
Hmm.
whether we have gone all the way through the process from start to finish, which there is no end, folks, in case you think there's an end of anything. Life is not like that. It's dynamic and it
Yeah.
never changes. It's
Right.
the revolving circle of trying to get closer and closer to this little center that we call home, and eventually we may get there, but all of it is just practice. I have a big
Yeah.
post-it note right here on my board that says it's all practice,
It is all practice. It's all play. Yeah.
all play.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that. So you're talking about there's a chapter in the book.
Hmm.
Let's use that to talk about storytelling and how you crafted that. Let's dive into the weeds a little bit here of how you look at these different life experiences that you had and how you chose to weave them into this memoir to make a substantial story out of it.
Yeah, I had a few different pieces I had already written, and whenever I experienced something, this is before I was publicly sharing things. Whenever I experienced something that felt important, sometimes I encounter things in life that feel like I just experienced a
Mhm.
little movie or a story. I try to write it down. So there's many chapters in the book I had no either notes for or drafts just from years ago because I had experienced something special. And so I started that as my starting place. And then I filled in, well, what other memorable things happened? And I went by themes
Mhm.
And I wanted to get across different, shame is a big theme for me and overcoming shame. And so bringing out stories where sometimes it just came as I started writing the stories, like, oh, there's so much shame here that needs to be processed. But in other cases, I looked for what could really share that story. With the Tubbs fire, about a month afterwards, I had just wrote down everything I remembered from that week. And so I used those as my notes to transform the story. And I don't think that I was trying to say in that chapter anything in particular except for just showing,
Hmm.
this is my experience of that, and I think that that one has for people who have read it that were from Sonoma County, actually even outside, that it's been a very difficult but important read to not re to realize what it was like, because I think when we see news reports, it does seem terrible, but we still don't quite understand what it might be like internally for someone.
No, and you get, firsthand, whether you're the actual survivor of losing your home or
Hmm.
a close relative, it affected us all. I mean,
Hmm.
my wife, Chrissy, was working at the Press Democrat, and we smelled the smoke when we woke up that morning in October
Hmm.
7th. And
Hmm.
it's like something's going on. And we checked the news, and next thing you know, she's looking at the news feed for the Press Democrat, and she bolted up there and was covering as much as she possibly could. And that team ended up getting a Pulitzer Prize for their coverage because they were on it and they were the conduit um, for communicating important information to the community. And
Hmm.
it's just tragic, you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
and one of the main things I wanted to make sure we mention in this, overall for me, stories matter a lot, which I know we've been talking about, but everyone's stories matter. So I'm writing this book to process and share a story with people, but we all individually have the opportunity to examine our stories and retell them, whether or not we're writing a book formally or not. Through talking with people, we can recognize, I think one of the mourning things we all had to, well, at least that I went through is I came back to Sonoma County. My mom was from Sonoma County and I lived abroad and then I came back. And I just had this sense of this was going to be a place. It's beautiful here. We
yeah,
all live here because it's beautiful. And when those fires came, especially the repeated more and more years, that sense of I have this safe, beautiful community I live in, like that felt broken.
yeah.
Um, and so to retell a story that no longer depended on this place, which is still beautiful, but that my safety could didn't need to depend on this place anymore, even if I love it. And was a really hard retelling of my story to make. But our brains take data and facts and we place it together into a narrative to make sense of it. And so to find healing in our lives, we can take the same data and transform a new story out of it without changing what happened to us. By retelling our stories and learning to retell them, it just can be really impactful. So I want to encourage people listening, you don't have to write a book to do this kind of work. It can happen in conversations with one another too.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up too. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. In particular, the neuroscience aspect,
Hmm.
because it's one of the bullet points here, and you've done a lot of
Hmm.
research and are well versed in understanding to speak articulately about it. But let's take the neuroscience aspect and the stories that we know and the stories that we've lived with, i.e., the belief patterns, because for those who
Hmm.
don't know, neuroscience is really a function of the belief mechanism in our brain doesn't know the difference between false and true. That's it
Hmm.
in a Cliff Notes version. But the stories that we tell to ourselves and to others reinforce what that belief system is. Now, talking about writing and what you've come back to a couple times here with the fire stories, um, how has this process for you been cathartic? And I'm giving you a loaded question here on
Hmm.
purpose because, like Natalie just said, folks, you don't have to write a novel. You don't have to write a full book. You don't even have to write a short story for an anthology or for your own purpose. You can journal and
Hmm.
get those thoughts out of your brain and onto the paper physically. You can use a word processor, but there's something that happens between the brain and a pen and a piece of
Hmm.
paper that is far more impactful. So let's talk about that a little bit. What has this done for you cathartically in the process of putting together a memoir? Because it sounds to me like there's a lot of different stories here, but what's happened to Natalie in this process?
Yeah, I think like the shame was one that really became clear when I wrote some stories like, oh, I didn't realize how much shame I was holding on to and helping myself let go of that through the writing. The other thing that I think was really when I started thinking of writing a book, it was just a project to do while I was recovering because I was in such an achiever sort of person that I needed to say, I'm leaving my job, I'm going to write a book. Well, I couldn't even try to write it for a long time, but I would write something every day and I was not well yet. And all the stories, no matter what I tried to write about my day, the illness kept coming back, and I
Mhm.
realized, oh, it's gonna come. No matter where I started, I would come back to the illness, and so it was clear to me that I needed that it was actually helping me process what had happened to me in my illness, not just the physical part of it, but emotionally that process of being ill. So doing that daily writing. And I also did morning pages, which was very helpful too for processing. And I recommend that. That's from a book called The Artist's Way. But it just allowed me to get, our brain, as I was talking about, takes this data and puts it together and creates meaning out of it. And that
Mhm.
motivates us. It's a lot of it's subconscious. So it changes the actions we take or don't take, how we experience reality, how we experience other people. It's actually all built on these stories that we've absorbed from the media, from books, from movies, for better or for worse. And then the stories our brain has told us about ourselves. And
Mhm.
so by either writing it out or talking to someone, we're able to see, it's a step in which we're able to see our stories outside of us and evaluate, oh, is that really what I think about my life? And it gives us a chance to get it out, but also maybe reimagine it without, don't change the facts of our lives and we don't try to hide anything that happened, but we can actually change it from, being the victim of our own life story to
Right.
saying, I want to be the heroine of my own life story. And what is the room I have to change and shift my story now? And being able to express it outwardly, in writing or in great conversations. And I have a couple book recommendations that I think are helpful for that. But uh, being able to tell your story, look at it, and then decide, I'm going to tell my story in a new way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just because I just realized I don't want to force people to have to go back and listen to the other episode. Do you mind just
Yeah,
giving a quick overview of what the health challenges were that you
sure.
just for context?
Yeah, I in 2021 in July I got a COVID infection and my body basically went into dysfunction. It's sometimes referred to as long COVID, but I was basically disabled for in many, many different ways for 2 years, and then it took me another 2 years to fully recover once I learned the brain training. I was very isolated and very not really able to do anything, not able anything. Only very basic things for myself, not even including cooking, but taking my own showers I could do.
So, and had you started this book before this incident happened?
No, when I decided the one thing I did do was a few hours of work a day, in a very disabled state. And I realized I needed to stop that in order to recover. And so at the time, it was too scary to just say I'm stopping work to recover. So I told people I was going to focus on recovery and write a book. And then soon enough, I realized, what are you doing? Just recover. But as I was, as I
You
was
had good
gaining
intentions.
I did. It was fine. It was what my brain needed because it was so scary to just say I'm stopping.
Hmm.
Um, but as I recovered, I was gaining capacity. So I thought, oh, you said you were going to write a book. Let's do that. And so I've been working on it kind of through that recovery process. After probably 6 months, I had enough capacity I could go back and try to start working on the book.
So let's talk about just because you're writing a book,
Hmm.
you're in the thick of it right now. Inevitably, as a writer, for me, there are always moments where I feel blocked. And it's
Hmm.
not just long COVID blocked, it's just blocked. I
Hmm.
get an idea and it's like, I know there's something more here. How do I work through it? How do I write my way through it? Or how do I accept the fact, like go back to acceptance, that I'm blocked right now and I don't necessarily have to do anything about it to try and force my way through that. Sometimes the way for me personally is to actually stop, go for a walk, go out to the coast, smell the ocean, hear the bird, do something different than doing this holding on, I got to get through.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
have you experienced any of that in your process of writing this book for the last 11 years or whatever it is?
Oh no, not 11 years. The book is about 11 years, but it
Oh, okay. I
no,
was,
no,
yeah,
no.
that's why the timeline wasn't registering
Oh
right.
no, no,
Okay,
no. The book is 11 years of life on the farm. I've been
got it.
working on it for 2 years. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a balance of what you said. I learned the technique of just writing, even if it is I have no idea what to write, and just letting myself getting that perfection out of the way and just get some
Hmm.
ideas flowing. And I think that when you feel stuck, to just start that way, let it be, set a timer for 15 minutes, or I usually do 30 minutes, and just get something on the page, even,
Yes.
and usually some fragment will be there. And if I feel motivated, I keep going. And if not, um, maybe I'll go do that walk. And usually in that break time, something, the subconscious is amazing. If we can let go of that control
Mhm.
and it's working on it in the background, and I come back and I see it. I know for the book, I wanted something about rain and drought. I wanted a chapter about rain and drought, but I didn't have like a story for it. And you don't want to just give the speech about rain and drought. And so just doing that process of just write what comes to your mind, and sure enough, eventually a story came out of it. And so to just trust in that process, that if you do that free timed writing, which also works for kind of emotional processing kind of things as well, where it's not going to be for a book, but you're just going to, for 30 minutes, write on a topic that you feel like has been a stressor, and just go and see what comes out. It's just really interesting things come out of our brain if we relax into it.
And that's the freedom that happens. I've been there many, many times, and
Hmm.
often my routine in the morning is to grab my phone. I read something that's inspirational, usually a little bit, some kind of a spiritual, whatever, and it immediately sparks something where I'll journal a little bit, but those journals turn into short little writing pieces, and sometimes
Hmm.
I do something with them, sometimes I don't.
Hmm.
I've trained my brain over the last 10 years to just actually probably more the last 6 years of having this little simple thing on my phone. I did have it all organized with notes and folders, and I'm like, this is just ugh. Throw it in one folder that's called notes, and
Yeah.
another folder that's called goals, and another folder that's called big ideas. It may or may not be a big idea. And I actually got this from Jeff Goins, who's a best-selling author, who was our keynote speaker at the conference in 2024 for Redwood Writers. And it's just big ideas. I don't have to do anything with it. Just get the idea down. And going back to that just writing
Hmm.
concept, Anne Lamott in her book Bird by Bird, I knew Anne Lamott and I know what she was like just writing on little 3 by 5 note cards before word processors, before smartphones. What are you writing? Just got to get the idea down.
Hmm.
She's had numerous talks of talking about this neuroses of just having to get it all out. So from a writer's perspective, I hear you.
And I was so in the past when I would write down notes, I had a lot of pressure on myself to do something with it.
Right.
And so that in the past, that almost caused it, not almost, it did. It caused a level of stress that I had good ideas, and if I didn't take action on them or do some, or what if I lost the good idea? And I have abandoned this way of thinking. So I too now have all sorts of notes all over the place. I take and ideas that flow, and I just trust that the important ones I'm gonna remember and come back to. And it's okay that some just float away. And know that trusting that subconscious part of the brain, it's gonna come back and not having to feel like, oh, I had this good idea and I don't want to lose it because then that was my only good idea or something. Like to just let open up that channel to let ideas flow out more easily.
But you're touching on some stuff, and both of us have, you've admitted it off air and even
Hmm.
here is some of the perfectionistic
Hmm.
tendencies. I get it. I'm a doer. I'm an
Hmm.
action-oriented guy. And if I come up with an idea, well, I better damn well follow through with it.
Because it's a good idea.
'Cause it's a good idea. But if you look at it, drives my wife nuts when she comes and looks at my office because I have good ideas all the time and I write them on little sticky notes and I put
Hmm.
them on my board and it gets overwhelming and then it gets to the place where I can't do anything.
Yeah.
And you know what I do? I take them all down and I throw them in an envelope and I know they're over there. And like you just said, if it's important enough, our subconscious is working all the time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Enough about me. I want to go back to something that you alluded to because we can kind of go down this a different direction to be
Hmm.
a bit more outward facing with you and I having a conversation here towards the authors who are still stuck in the 6 inches between their ears.
Hmm.
They have an idea. They may have written a few things. They may be trying to edit as they write a rough draft. Advice, don't get it all out, then edit yourself, then edit again yourself, then edit a third time, then find somebody to copy edit it. If
Hmm.
you want, you can do the other editing and learn what that's all about. But let's talk about number one, how you use stories with some of your teaching and your Substack
Hmm.
as a springboard to help connect people, number one.
Hmm.
And then number two, let's wrap up with just a few takeaways for people that they might find helpful if they're considering being a writer, wanting to be a writer, thinking about stories that have been eating them up alive. They really want to get out, but they have some mental blocks. So let's do those two things.
Okay. Um, So for my with my Substack, it's
Mm.
a free newsletter. I just do it once a month, 1,500 words, and I section it so there's a short farm story, and then there's some teaching and reflection. And I do that because I love farm stories, but really because our brain remembers stories so well. For me, pairing the two things together, my hope and belief is that people will have the teaching will be more memorable. So, for example, in January's story, there's this story. My aunt calls me on the phone one morning. She lives next door and said, "Can you come help push our cousin's truck out of the mud?" So, me and my other aunt, we have to push this truck out of the mud. But in order to push it forward, it's kind of stuck in these muddy wells. We had to push it backwards
Hmm.
onto the grass and then forward again. And so it's a funny story because one of my aunts is a little grumpy and we were laughing through the whole process. But then the teaching was about that idea that sometimes we have to lean into our opposites to correct. And so using that metaphor of needing to push the truck backwards in order to move forward is a way that I'm underlining this sort of personal growth story by tool by using this story to demonstrate it. And that's because our brains really remember well with story. And so that's one way that I'm using story in my work to help people remember something and connect to a tool.
And what you just did, and I'm going to just, I don't want to miss this opportunity
Hmm.
because I'm sitting here processing, making a couple notes with a pen on an actual
Hmm.
notebook, and it reminded me of stuff of a similar thing. And we sometimes have to take two steps back before we take a step and two and three forward.
Hmm.
And just that simple story,
Hmm.
that's the beauty of a word picture. I brought me back
Hmm.
to a time when we were stuck in the mud and my dad was trying to get the Volkswagen bus out and we had
Hmm.
weight, we had all the things that you do. It's okay. There's more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak. There's more
Yeah.
than one way to get out of a muddy rut.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I'm using story a lot is just by vividly uh, capturing our brain to use the brain's capacity to imagine things. It helps us to apply it practically to our lives. And your second question, do you mind if I alter it a little bit?
Not at all, but I want to go
Yeah.
extend what you just talked about a second, because some of this happens with people who are creative, but they're also perfectionistic,
Hmm.
of thinking that it's not creative enough, that it's not unique enough, that it's not going to connect enough. All this, and I call it mental horseshit because that's basically what it is what writing your own truth and coming back to thinking creatively means thinking creatively. It's not just outside of the box, it's looking at things from all angles so that you can kind of have this more holistic perspective that this one way is not the only way. Just because it works right for this person
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's going to work for you. I love that story. Now you just told me a story I'll probably never forget. Anytime I see a muddy rut, I'm going to remember Natalie and then the story of my dad getting stuck in the mud up in Humboldt.
Yeah. Sometimes we gotta push the other way to go forward.
We do. Change it however you like, and then we're gonna wrap in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, well, I rather than talk just to authors, I wanted to, you know, give a couple thoughts for anybody that's listening, which is to just make room for telling stories in your life. And that can be probably most effectively in conversations with people to have
Mm.
to learn to make ask better questions because even when we make time to be with people, we can end up in this rut of just talking about the latest in politics or the weather, and instead to make the space, phones placed to the side, to really have good, meaningful conversations. I read a book which I recommend by David Brooks called How to Know a Person, and it's about having these deeper conversations. And it is he talks about story in this book and says that for most people, writers will tell their stories. And I'm from a family of really funny storytellers, so I will tell stories to people whether they ask or not. Like it's just in me. But for
Hmm.
many people, the only chance they have to tell their story is when someone asks them. So it's such a gift to be able to ask someone to tell their stories. And then the second part of that gift of asking and talking with people is that it's not only the only chance they have of telling their stories, but it may be the only chance they actually put their story together for themselves so that they can see it outside of themselves. And then that's so empowering because then you have the opportunity to see, oh, this is how my life has been, or I think I want to tell my story differently. So it's such a gift to have meaningful conversations because of those two things. You are giving someone the chance to really have their story to be heard and to actually put their story together. So I think it's a great book to just improve conversations. I have a go-to question I've been using for a couple years that is great, that is what's bringing you joy. And it's fantastic. People can just say they bought a cheese from Trader Joe's that they think is delicious and that's bringing them joy. Or they might go deep. And I've been over and over blown over that people want to go deep fast 'cause people are longing to have meaningful conversation. So that's my first thing is encouraging people to really have tell and ask people to tell their stories because it's so healing. And then the other thing is kind of evaluating how you're telling your story, what stories you're surrounding yourself with, and realizing that that's impacting you and that you can make shifts in surrounding yourselves with different stories or telling your stories in a new way. And there's a good book called The Story You Need to Tell, which I think is really good for emotional processing and evaluating your stories.
You just touched on something that I've been noodling in the subconscious, and thank you again for bringing it to the surface. But
Hmm.
this, a lot of what we're talking about here isn't necessarily new. It's just bringing it out of our own, what we know into the
Hmm.
conscious conversation that you and I are having here. But what you just alluded to about asking better questions and then, having people asking what brings them joy, that's straight out of, it's not straight out of because he learned it from somewhere else, but there's an 80-year-old book called How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Hmm.
Dale
Hmm.
Carnegie. It's a
Hmm.
perennial bestseller. The basic premise there is exactly what you just talked about. It's
Hmm.
showing interest in other people because the most magical word in the world is hearing somebody addressed by their own first name because it makes them feel heard and
Hmm.
valued and
Hmm.
belong.
Hmm.
And the counterpart or the corollary to this of what helps support this is to ask a question with sincere desire to be interested and show empathy and compassion without trying to fix somebody, without trying to
Right.
change them, but be present and be a good listener.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what you just shared, what reminded me of it is I use this all the time in sales. It's part of the reason why I'm such an effective salesperson is sometimes on a new client, I'm like, so I have a whole bunch of stuff here that I can share with you about all these different products that I have to offer. That's great. Why'd you get in business?
Hmm.
And I'm saying this for the other listening audience, but also as you go out there and do your workshops and stuff, these are the things that people love to talk about.
Hmm.
They're
And
just
it's part of their story again, right? It's
they're waiting for somebody to ask them, and they want
yeah.
the humility and the false pride, I call it. They don't
Hmm.
necessarily want to talk about it because they don't want to be bragging, but you
Hmm.
ask them, they're off to the races, and you just made a new best friend.
Yeah. And it's that whatever's motivating them, if people are very excited about going back to your comment about writers and that perfectionist side, I think if we can get deep down to what is really, what is it we want to bring to this world, maybe that's in your business or in your writing, like motivate your writing from that point. Like, what do
Mhm.
I want to bring to the world? And if you can bring it down to that level of joy and motivation, then it helped me to get beyond the perfectionist stuff. I still get caught up in it, if I say a typo that went out I didn't see, but for the most part, get your intention and what you want to do, and that drive can just, move you along.
Well, we're gonna wrap on
Okay.
this right here, and I'm gonna use your own question to you,
Uh-huh.
Natalie. What brings you joy?
Oh, right now, I'm just so thrilled to be able to do the work that I'm doing, to bring out of a really difficult time, the most difficult time in my life, to be able to share what I've learned and just help people to see that no matter what is going on in the world, like we're just so lucky to be experiencing anything in life. And so I just am motivated now to help people to find a way to operate in the world in a place with that's just a bit more at ease with the world that is difficult right now. So that's what's bringing me joy.
And I love that. And folks, this is one of the reasons why I started this podcast because honestly, it's unscripted. We sometimes have some prompt questions, but we never know where it's going to go because that's kind of how life is. We show
Hmm.
up, we be present, we ask smarter questions, we show some care and compassion for our fellow human beings. And you know what the outcome of that is? It's exactly what Natalie, what you just said. That's the joy. It's the joy of showing up and being curious and learning and growing and being willing to change. Folks, this has been Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. We've been visiting for the last 45 minutes with Natalie Gould. And the working title, you want to share the working title again, or you want to just leave it as
Well, we'll leave it there, but invite people to join that Substack because it's free, and I'll announce about the books. And I have an upcoming retreat that I'm doing
yeah,
on.
tell people how to get a hold of you for that
Yeah,
and where they can register for the retreat because it's coming up pretty soon here,
it
right?
is coming up pretty soon. So my website is, you'll have in the show notes, I guess, but it's sparrowandcrowfarm.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter there, learn about me and my other work. I'm doing a retreat in San Diego on March 7th and one here in Sonoma County at the Santa Rosa Journey Center on March 14th. It's a morning retreat. I'll be reading a sort of a dramatic reading of a story I wrote for the Redwood Writers Anthology, and then we'll be doing story sharing about times in of life of our life of healing and transformation. These particular retreats are using Christian narratives as a backdrop. Anyone is welcome. However, some people may not find that approachable, but I'll be doing other retreats in the future using other kinds of stories that are not religious in nature.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Natalie, thanks for joining us again, and all the best to you on your two events coming up
Thank
and
you.
future work with this memoir when you finally get to hold that proof copy in your hand.
No, I can't wait. So
Don't ever
much to
forget
learn
that.
before not then of how to make that happen. But
But
yeah,
it's going to happen. And when you get there, relish, I'm giving you unsolicited advice, but relish the moment. I know
I
you
will.
will
Yeah.
because you only get a chance to do it one time and the very first one. And then you go back 10 years later and go, a lot's changed. Let's go do another one.
That's right.
But folks, this is Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. Natalie Gould is our guest. And you know what? Tune in next time, share it, like it, love it, talk about it, because we've had some really great conversations on this show. And I know Natalie's listened to a few. I've listened to a few recently. I don't usually do so after I record them, but keep coming back because we've got some further guests down the road here that are going to blow your mind. And thanks again for joining us, Natalie.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.